These stories are based on real life events. The purpose of sharing these experiences is not to spread fear or superstition, but to document an encounter with the unknown. Listener discretion is advised. Visuals are made with AI.
Hi, my name is Sophie. The Texas summer was oppressive, a suffocating blanket of humidity that seemed to drain the life out of everything in Austin. We had moved into that old, sprawling property in a historic part of town, hoping for a fresh start. It was a charming house with character, but the air inside often felt stagnant. For the first few months, life was normal enough. My husband, Mark, worked late shifts, and I stayed home with our infant daughter, Lily. The trouble started when we decided to move our sleeping arrangements to the upstairs room. It was supposed to be a sanctuary, a cooler space with windows that caught the evening breeze, but that room had a different energy. It overlooked the neighbor's property, a neglected lot that had been empty for years. The house next door was a rotting shell, surrounded by overgrown weeds and trees that blocked out the moonlight. One sweltering night, while Mark was at work, I was putting Lily to sleep. As I sat in the dim light of the room, I glanced out the window toward the abandoned house next door. That's when I saw her. A woman, unnaturally tall and thin, was perched on the top of the neighbor's perimeter fence. She wasn't just standing there, she was perfectly still, her long, pale limbs bent at sharp, impossible angles. She stared directly into our room, her face a blur of shadow. My heart hammered against my ribs. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of the light, but when I looked again, she hadn't moved. She seemed to be watching us, feeding on the quiet of the night. Terrified, I gathered Lily and retreated inside, locking the door behind me. But the peace didn't last. That night, the house began to speak. It started with a rhythmic, wet, scratching sound against the wood of our door. Not a knock, but the sound of fingernails dragging across the grain. It moved around the doorframe, slowly, deliberately. I hid under the blankets, praying it would stop. Just as dawn began to break, the scratching ceased, and I collapsed into a fitful, exhausted sleep. When Mark returned the next morning, I told him everything. He tried to dismiss it, claiming I was sleep-deprived and paranoid, but his skepticism evaporated a few nights later. We were both upstairs when we heard a heavy, deliberate thud against the window, the sound of a palm pressing hard against the glass. Mark rushed to the window, throwing it open to confront whoever was outside. There was no one there. The yard was pitch black and deathly silent. The most horrific incident occurred when Lily began to scream, an inconsolable, shrill terror that made my blood run cold. She was staring at the floor beneath her crib. I scrambled to pick her up, and as I did, I saw it. A shadow, darker than the room, a void in the shape of a large, hunched creature slinking out from under the bed. It wasn't a cat or a dog. It had a mass and a presence that felt ancient and malevolent. The room was suddenly filled with a stench so foul, a mix of stagnant water and rotting vegetation, that I gagged. We fled that room, leaving everything behind. We soon learned about the old live oak tree in our backyard, whose roots had grown into the wall of our house. The neighbors spoke in hushed tones about it. Years ago, someone had tried to cut that tree down, and they were thrown backward by an invisible force, ending up hospitalized for weeks. The locals avoided the property, whispering that something was bound to that tree, something that hated being disturbed. We brought in a spiritual medium to cleanse the house, but the darkness was stubborn. The medium told us the abandoned house next door was a festering wound, a place where a parasitic entity had taken root, feeding on the innocence of our child. They left us with a warning. The entity was not just a ghost. It was a hungry, predatory force that had latched onto us the moment we moved into that upstairs room. We performed the cleansing rituals, using blessed water to ward off the darkness. But the heavy, oppressive feeling never fully lifted. Every night, the knocking on the stairs continued, relentless and aggressive, as if something was demanding to be let in. We realized that no amount of prayer or ritual could make that house a home. It was no longer ours. It belonged to whatever was lurking in the shadows. We packed our belongings in a haze of panic and moved to a house on the other side of town. This is an account of the experience my family and I endured nearly 2 decades ago in a rental property in Houston, Texas. My name is Brianne, and I am sharing this because even after all this time, the memory remains a festering wound in our family history. We were preparing for my older sister's wedding, and because our own home was too small to accommodate the influx of relatives, we decided to rent a large, sprawling house in a quiet, older neighborhood. It seemed like the perfect solution: spacious, historic, and well-kept. We moved in during the peak of the Texas summer. The heat was relentless, suffocating. When we discovered the basement, we saw it as a sanctuary. It was cool, significantly temperature-controlled, and expansive enough to serve as a makeshift dormitory. We moved several old beds and chairs downstairs, excited about the newfound space. But the basement was deceptive. No matter how many lights we installed, that room remained swathed in a heavy, unnatural darkness. It felt as if the shadows had a physical weight to them. The electrical wiring was a nightmare. Every time we plugged in a lamp, it would function perfectly during the day, only to spark, flicker, and die the moment the sun went down. We called electricians, but they could find no fault in the system. They would look at us with confused, pitying expressions, shrug, and leave. Our first night was the beginning of the end of our peace. Around midnight, a sound shattered the silence, a cacophony of heavy rhythmic thuds from the floor above, where the bedrooms were. It sounded like multiple people were sprinting across the hardwood floors, their footfalls frantic and aggressive. We were terrified. My brother Mark and my father scrambled up the stairs to investigate, convinced we were being burglarized. But when they reached the door to the basement, they found it locked from the outside. Not latched, locked. My father hammered on the door, shouting, threatening to call the police, but there was no response. The movement upstairs continued, unabated, until it morphed into something truly terrifying. The rhythmic, wet thudding of a hammer hitting wood, sounding as if the structure itself was being dismantled from within. We were paralyzed. We didn't sleep a wink. As the sun began to rise, the house went deathly silent. My brother unlocked the door and threw it open. The house was exactly as we had left it. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. There were no signs of entry. My parents tried to rationalize it, suggesting it was just the house settling, or perhaps the neighbors. But the silence in the room was suffocating. The days that followed were worse. While cleaning the rooms, we started finding small bones that didn't look of any human, tucked into corners and under floorboards in every single room. It was as if the house was exhaling these cursed remnants of a past we couldn't understand. The physical manifestations grew more frequent. One sweltering afternoon, my sister and I retreated to the basement to escape the heat. As we descended the stairs, we heard the distinct, hushed murmurs of two women speaking, their voices intertwining in a chilling cadence. We froze, staring at one another before sprinting back upstairs in a panic. When my parents rushed down, the voices had vanished, but the atmosphere in the basement had shifted. On the far wall, we discovered something that hadn't been there before. Black, smudge-like marks, shaped unmistakably like human hands, pressed into the concrete. It looked as if someone had coated their palms in soot and clawed at the wall. The climax of our torment occurred when Mark, exhausted by our warnings, insisted on sleeping in the basement alone to prove he wasn't afraid. We heard his screams around 2 a.m. We rushed downstairs to find him lying on the floor, convulsing, his face pale and contorted in pure, unadulterated terror. When we managed to drag him out and revive him, he was covered in deep purple bruises, marks on his throat and wrists that looked like they had been left by fingers far stronger than any human's. He told us, through choked sobs, that he had seen two elongated, shadowy figures with hollow protruding eyes and tongues that seemed to lash out like whips. He claimed they had lifted him from the bed and tossed him aside like a rag doll. We left that house behind, and we never looked back. To this day, I refuse to even step foot in a basement. Some places are not meant for human habitation. They belong to something else, something that waits in the dark